as we go through it all, I would be very upset if we end up with Kirk Cousins again. We were just talking about that leading into this.
There's no way. There's no way our fan base can handle it. It'd be ridiculous.
I can't imagine that actually goes down, but I've been wrong before.
That would be one of the wildest turn of events for sure.
Yeah, new culture, my ass. It'd be crazy. I think they probably want to do a whole new face of the franchise with a new quarterback, I think.
How's it going, Logan?
Hey, what's up, man? How are you?
Hey, thanks for joining. I just actually sent it to you as well, the link.
All
So
right.
thanks for hopping on, man.
I'm gonna join via my computer. That's better for me. So just,
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
Sounds good. So we'll kick it off, just to kind of give everyone a rundown for tonight. We're obviously going to hit on the week one of our preseason schedule against the New England Patriots. I think a lot of stuff buzzing on Twitter. A lot of stuff buzzing on Twitter about Ron Rivera too, which was kind of like, as a Washington football team fan, pretty upsetting to see. For those of you who are not in the know, there was a charitable initiative that a lot of the fans had done, which was pretty great, getting Ron Rivera these like boxing gloves for his fight against cancer and making a $5,000 donation to a charity. And then there were some people that were actually upset that Ron Rivera did not publicly thank them for the gift and the donation, which I felt like very not socially aware of. Like, we're in the middle of training camp, we're in the middle of roster cuts, they're actually getting ready for the season. So today was just like, can we just not have nice things as fans sometimes? Do we just sometimes botch it? But that one was kind of a bummer for me to see that going out there. But we got a great show for you tonight. So we got George Carmi from Full Press Coverage joining us, and former Washington football team tight end Logan Paulsen as well. Before we jump into it, though, I do want to call out one thing. There was a really great charitable initiative, lead us with a positive note, by the Hog Farmers. For those of you that don't know the Hog Farmers, I'm sure most Washington football team fans do. They are a Washington football team superfan charity that focuses on pediatric cancer. Well, there's an 11-year-old boy, Jalen, that they're helping out over there. He's got stage 4 colon cancer and was just given a 2-month life expectancy. So the Hog Farmers are doing some great things. He's got a little bit of a wish list of things that he's trying to get in this next 2 months. Go into Legoland, go into Six Flags, a couple other things. So if you guys have the opportunity to, definitely go check them out on Twitter or go check out their website and do what you can, even if it's just retweeting or liking a post or donating $5, do what you can for that. That's a really big initiative we're all trying to get behind right now. So just wanted to plug that really quickly for the Hog Farmers there. But yeah, so just to take us away from that, obviously, as sad as it is, but awesome that the fans have rallied around it. I think I was talking to Chris, and he had said that they've already got the Six Flags piece locked up, and they're continuing to go on. Had a lot of big news for the Washington football team over this last week. We obviously had our first preseason game against the New England Patriots. One of the things that kind of Twitter was all over the place with these last couple of days was the fan base was a little bit skeptical about Jamin Davis's performance. And I saw a lot of things going around of like, did we make a mistake not trading up for one of the quarterbacks? And I think you saw Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Trevor Lawrence, Fields. They all had like really, really dynamic first weeks of their preseason. So, first off, I'm going to pass it to you, Logan. My question for you is, what did you see from Jamin Davis week one? To me, it seemed like the defense was really trying to keep the passing game in front of them, taking more of like a bend, don't break approach. Or are the fans being a little overcritical on his performance?
So I had the opportunity to, first off, thanks for having me on the show. Really appreciate it. I had the opportunity to go to practice a couple weeks ago with the Julie Donaldson team over there at the Washington football park. And, when I went and watched that practice, I thought, man, he looks a little bit slow, kind of mentally slow, having a hard time processing it. He's playing middle linebacker. He's kind of generaling the defense. And I think that's extremely challenging for a young player like a one-year starter out of Kentucky to come in, kind of helm an NFL defense. And everyone says, oh, well, defensive concepts are probably pretty similar to Kentucky. And I would totally agree with that. However, you're kind of mirroring or matching something that's infinitely more complex than an NFL offense, right? You get way more formations, you get way more personnel packages, you get way more kind of cadence variation and kind of adjustments at the line of scrimmage that you as the middle linebacker have to kind of respond to. And so I kind of just felt when I was at practice, he was swimming a little bit. And then when I watched the game, like, I think I came on this show and said that I think he could be the defensive rookie of the year. I still believe that. I just think his progression and his ascension to that position might take some more time because he's got a lot to chew right now. And it's going to take him a while to digest all that. And I think everyone has like this knee-jerk reaction in the NFL, like, whatever happened this last week is what's going to be the case for the whole year. And that's unequivocally incorrect. You know what I mean? Like it's a long season. It's still technically like practice, like this is a practice time of year, like he might not even end up playing Mike linebacker. I really think the guy that should play Mike is probably John Bostic. Like he's done a great job in camp, general, like really that general kind of cerebral football player, like he has that down in spades, and I think that should be his role. And Jamin should play Will, which is kind of much simpler and easier, more read and react kind of positioning. So, like to me, I think huge overreaction. I think it's an overreaction to kind of go, oh, he's terrible. It's an overreaction to say, oh, we should have gone a quarterback. Like the quarterbacks are going against preseason 1 defenses. You know what I mean? Like how much did those teams prepare for this game? Like some teams probably didn't even open their playbook. They just kind of kept practicing straight through. So to me, like it's a gross overreaction, and everyone just chill out. We got a lot of time left to go here. We got 3 more games and 3 more weeks of practice. So let's see what happens.
And it kind of reminds me of like the reactions back in 2002 when Steve Spurrier was the new head coach of Washington. And I don't know if people remember this, but we opened up against the San Francisco 49ers that preseason, and we blew them out of the water 38-7. It was like everybody was like Super Bowl, and we pretty much dominated that whole preseason. Danny Warfel looked great. Like this is the preseason. Everything's vanilla. People are trying out new things. New coaching staffs are just getting used to their players and players to the coaching staff. It is not the end all be all. So do not hate Jamin Davis because of what you saw in one preseason game, please. So George, wanted to pass to you. What did you see out of Jamin this week?
I think Logan nailed it, actually. I kind of in the same ballpark. I think Jamin Davis, you got him as a projection, right? He's a 1-year starter at Kentucky, athletic freak. He was really fast. He's more of a run and react kind of linebacker. And I kind of had the same theory that Paulsen did. I kind of was like, you know what? I think maybe they're going to implement him and kind of teach him the defense from the inside out and start him at middle linebacker. And then eventually, transition him to the will linebacker, because I think it's more of like a zone coverage kind of read and react kind of position as opposed to what John Bostic would excel at the middle linebacker position. So I actually kind of wanted to ask you, Logan, is that too much to ask of a rookie to do, to basically start off as a Mike to kind of get the background of the playbook and then switch up to Will like before week 1, or is that too much to overcome? What do you think?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it obviously depends. Like anything that's really complicated, it depends. It depends on the player, depends on the coaches, depends on the scheme, right? So when you look at a guy like Jamin Davis, like obviously we've talked about, when you're a starter, how much football does he actually know? How much football is he learning during this process, during training camp? And I think that there's reason to believe that if he learns Mike, he'll know all the other spots at linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the benefits of blowing that position is you are central. You kind of have to, like you said, like learn the defense from the inside out. I like that phrase quite a bit because I think that's spot on. And so I think you see guys who kind of learn that spot and then bump out. I think, there might be some kind of wish list thing for Ron Rivera that he ends up being the next Luke Kuechly and he's playing middle linebacker and helming the defense. And, like if you look at their athletic traits, they're pretty comparable. I think Luke's obviously like football IQ is through the roof, and that's what makes him a Hall of Famer. I don't think Jamin's quite there yet, but like if you watch his college tape, there is reason to think that he's going to be a special football player for a long time. It just, what is his development process like? How is his team going to do that? And I think ultimately, he might come out next week and play out of his mind. I'm just saying, like from what I've seen in practice so far, I think he's not regressing because he hasn't been anywhere, right? It's just taking longer than I think people would have hoped. And then there always is this ace in the hole that you can just bump him to will linebacker, which is kind of a notoriously simpler position to learn. So, you always have that ability. I think he'll be playing week 1. It just depends on what capacity. Like when I was doing the evaluation, I kind of envisioned him playing, Mike and then Mike and base defense, Mike and nickel, Mike and dime, kind of being your 3-down linebacker, but that might not be the case. In practice, John Boston's playing the starting nickel, and I think that is an indication of like where he's at from a mental standpoint, and that's not a criticism of Jamin. Like,
the rookie.
He's a rookie. So I just think, it's going to take time. And I think everyone needs to just kind of be cool about it.
I agree.
I think with the fan base, you saw a lot of, and sorry to interrupt, George, you saw a lot of like the success of the rookie quarterbacks, though. And I think we've been so hungry for a quarterback for so long that people are just waiting to get that excited about a quarterback in Washington.
Well, I mean, that's kind of ridiculous in a lot of ways. I mean, like, I'm sure people, but like 3 of those guys were like top 5 picks. So what are you going to do? You're going to mortgage your whole life, mortgage the future of this franchise to bump up there? Like, if you watch Fields' college tape, like, yeah, he's a dynamic player, but he's a very far from a sure thing. You know what I mean? And like, if you look at the guy we were closest to, he was playing on the field with New England last night. And like, would you have mortgaged 2 first-round picks for that? Like, probably not. Like, put it in context, people. Like, look at it in the grand scope of what needs to happen. Don't look at it in this one game. Look at it 5 years from now and where you want to be.
Yeah, my thing is that with Davis, I think the whole athletic profile is there. It's kind of be patient and let it progress, let it project. Like, he is probably in the most insulated position he could be in the entire NFL. There's a great defensive line in front of him, 2 great defensive coaches there, and Jack Del Rio is a great. I trust in his abilities. So I think Davis, right now, his mind is moving slower than his body, but once his mind catches up, I think he can rise to the occasion, be an excellent linebacker. So I agree, be patient with him.
I mean, realistically, we're in week 3 training camp?
Yeah,
I mean, personality-wise, we know that if someone's going to try and tackle on as much as possible, it is going to be Jamin. Mentally, he's going to be in that playbook all the time. So I don't question it at all right now. Just take your time. Logan, this seems to really bother you, this conversation. You seem heated right now.
Fans get fired up, and that's why they're fans. They're fanatics. They love it, right? But I think, like, just take a breath. Like, just put it in context. Like, give it some kind of structure in your mind. Like, literally, like, he's been playing football here for, like, I don't know, maybe 3 months, 2.5 months. Like, how good do you expect him to be? I know there are rookies that come in and play at a really high level, but this is a very challenging defense. And I'm not worried at all. Like, if he plays Will this season, that's fine. Like, who cares?
Agreed. Now, speaking of quarterbacks, we got a good chance to look at Ryan Fitzpatrick and Taylor Heineke here. And I'll be honest, both looked pretty stable, had command of the offense. Granted, it's preseason, but I want to do a quick roundtable here, see what you all thought of this week. I know we touched on it a little bit before the show actually started, but Mark, I'll start it off with you, man. I want to get your thoughts on the quarterback position and what you saw out of Ryan Fitzpatrick and Taylor Heineke.
Fitz seems like he's ready to roll for the season. There obviously are some things that he still mentally is working on and learning from the new system, but he showed everything that you would want for the most part come week 1. Heineke showed that he's definitely the number 2 quarterback, in my opinion. He did show some nice things. He had some nice 3rd down conversions. He had the one to John Bates across the middle, and then he had that nice ball to Steve Sims going into the red zone.
Who made a couple nice grabs, by the way. Sims looked pretty good.
Yeah, but I just don't see talent-wise him competing for that number 1 job with Fitz. I think it's locked up for Fitz. Fitz made some great throws, especially that ball to Logan. The ball to Terry, the timing on those routes were fantastic. So it's exciting, especially knowing how good that Patriots defense actually is. You look at that front 7 with their rotation, they have a lot of good players on that defense. So it was nice to see week 1 in preseason.
And I'm going to you talked about the play to Logan Thomas. I'm going to give a quick plug to Logan Paulsen's Instagram because you did an amazing breakdown of that one play there where it was that back shoulder fade to Logan Thomas there. Wanted to pass it over to you and get your opinion on what you saw from Ryan Fitzpatrick. And, like I said, everyone should go check out Logan's Instagram. If you're not following, please do. He does a great job breaking down plays, analysis, players, everything. So go check him out.
Well, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that. So I would agree with Mark. I think that the offense under Fitzpatrick looked just on time and on rhythm. I think there was kind of 1 third down to Humphreys that got a little wonky. Humphreys got tripped up. And I think that stuff will kind of iron itself out. First road game, sometimes guys get a little nervous, a little heavy-legged. I think that stuff will kind of resolve itself as the season goes on. But I was just super impressed with the timing and the precision with which he executed the offense. He just seemed in total control. He seemed like he's on the same page with the guys. Like I mentioned that in the Instagram video, throw that back shoulder ball to Logan and to throw that kind of timing route in a tight window to Terry. I think it just shows that, I don't know what I was expecting, but he seems to be right where you'd want to be preseason week 1. Obviously, you want to see a development as the defenses and the structures get more complicated next week. But I think he's right on schedule, and I think it's really hard to compare, in my opinion, Fitzpatrick to Heineke, because Heineke has such a different playing style. He plays a little bit off schedule, right? He kind of plays more Mahomes, Wilson, Josh Allen type of philosophy at the position, and I think that it just, to my eye, it's really hard to compare because Fitz runs it the way it should be run, and Heineke's making plays, but outside the structure of what the offense would dictate, out of timing, not quite as crisp to my eye. I played 10 years, right? And so that was the standard for the position for 10 years when I was playing. But now, obviously, like I just listed a couple case studies where that's a successful play style, and people have winning franchises based around quarterbacks like that. I'm not saying that Heineke is that guy, but I think it's important to kind of keep that in mind when evaluating him. I think I'd like to see him do more stuff in the pocket, really, if I'm being totally candid. I think that would kind of bump him up in my mind to that one role. But I think like Mark said, the quarterback battle, in my opinion, is nigh. It is Fitzpatrick's job, and I know they're going to kind of keep this dog and pony show going for another couple of weeks. But it's his job, I think, ultimately.
I agree. The other thing that I thought got a little bit interesting, though, this preseason game was the running back room, and I was probably a little bit more skeptical on Jared Patterson's skill set watching some of his tape coming out, but I thought he looked pretty darn good. I mean, he had 10 carries for 40 yards, 4 receptions for 30 yards. Afterwards, you heard the coaching staff compare him to Darren Sproles. So question to you, Logan, how do you see the running back room shaking out? One of the big things that on Twitter, again, a lot of the fans are talking about is Peyton Barber's limited skill set. But I thought that, to be honest with you, Peyton Barber played a reliable role in 2020. I felt like he converted third downs, he converted red zone opportunities very consistently. And I think people underestimate that skill set a little bit. But how do you see the running back room shaking out?
Yeah, so I think you got a good indication of how the staff feels about the running back room when they cut Lamar Miller. When was that, yesterday or 2 days ago? I think that shows that they feel pretty good about where Patterson is at, and I think they should feel good about it. Like you mentioned, a lot of his film from Buffalo was really hard to evaluate because that Buffalo offensive line was carving these huge holes in the defense. Yep. And, I'm not saying this in jest. It was kind of like evaluating Derrick Henry when he was at Alabama. You kind of had these questions about his running style, can he read defenses, or is he just going to run to the first cut because the O-line is so good that it's making this hole? And obviously he answered those questions emphatically. I also wondered a little about his foot speed. He showed an ability to make people miss in the hole and kind of create yards after contact for a small guy. I said this the other day, but built like a fire hydrant, feet like a bunny rabbit. That's a good skill set for a running back. I don't think he's going to usurp or unseat Barber, I think, or what was his name?
McKissick, right?
No, the third guy, number 24.
Peyton Barber.
Peyton Barber, right? I always forget his name. I'm sorry, Peyton, if you're listening to this. But I think he's looked good in training camp. He's looked kind of like that reliable short yardage back, And so what I think, I heard this on the other day on the radio, and I think this is a pretty good insight. I think what you do is you kind of sit Patterson on the practice squad for a year, and then, McKissick's contract's up next year. And so instead of having to kind of sell the farm to get that, I think you've got a nice potential replacement. Obviously, that's a year away, so you got to see how guys develop. But that's what I would say. I think he's earned an opportunity to be a part of his organization for 2021 in some capacity, practice squad or active roster.
Yeah, you talked about the foot speed a little bit and that short area quickness. He had a really nice play actually in the open field against Ronnie Perkins, who's also a rookie from Oklahoma, but on one of his longer runs the other night, and just made him look silly in the open field. So it was interesting to see that happen Interesting to see Patterson develop there. I think one of the things that George, you had mentioned on Twitter was people were a little bit surprised that Lamar Miller had already gotten cut. And you made the point that like he's been on the roster already, right? Like I think people had the assumption that Lamar Miller was a free agent signing and an unknown entity, but he actually finished the season on our roster last year.
Exactly right. Yeah. So that's why I was kind of surprised. I feel like sometimes a name travels, right? So Lamar Miller was a Pro Bowler in 2018. I think people thought he was more of a big free agent acquisition, but I think he's been out of the league or hasn't been playing for the past 2 years. So we actually had him last year on our roster going into the playoffs because I think Antonio Gibson was nicked up and we added Lamar Miller as like a option. Yeah, it was something to kind of protect us in case if Antonio Gibson couldn't play. But kind of what Logan said, I agree with everything. I think with Lamar Miller being released, I think it kind of shows you the state of our running back room. And I think regardless of what fans think, you kind of have to kind of watch what the coaches are doing. And they do have faith in Peyton Barber and McKissick and Antonio Gibson. And honestly, I think, Ryan, you and I are in the same ballpark. Like Peyton Barber, he's not going to explode. He might, he doesn't have a career yards per carry average that's going to blow you away, but he serves a role, and that's what a good offensive coordinator wants. They want utility pieces to plug in whenever they need to kind of put them in the right place. So he's a good short yardage down back. If he's scoring touchdowns, getting first downs, why are you going to get mad at him? So I think having him in house and having McKissick having Patterson as a McKissick in training is definitely a good strategy to have for our team. So I kind of like the forward thinking that they're doing.
And also, I think like kind of you alluded to it a little bit there, but like, coordinators like people they can trust, right? And so one of the big knocks on every rookie that comes into training camp is how much can you trust them? How much can you put on their plate? Like when the moment gets big, is this a guy that you can trust that's going to get you 1 yard in a short yardage situation, that knows that I need to get down on this? You know what I mean? Like how much can you trust them? So I think with a guy from a small school like Buffalo, he's got a long road to earn that trust. And Barber has earned that. He's earned that equity over the course of his time here with the Washington football team. And I think, maybe you could make the argument at the end of last season that he didn't look very good. But every practice I've been to, which is 4 preseason games, he looks to be in good shape, right? He looks like a better version of himself. So
he lost weight, I heard, right? He dropped some pounds.
Yeah. He looks it in practice. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but so I just think like there's a guy who's got that trust, and he's reinforced that trust by kind of becoming a better version of himself. So I think it's really hard to kind of break that psyche for the coaches.
I think where fans get a little bit nervous is when Antonio Gibson did get that turf toe injury last year and we needed somebody to be that bell cow a little bit more. We didn't have that, right? So you saw a lot of McKissick in there and he got a ton of reception attempts. And then you see someone like Peyton Barber step in, and even in the preseason game, like blowing a passing coverage in the one instance where they asked him to pass block. And, it's those kind of instances, I think, where people are looking for, and maybe it's fantasy football. Maybe it's people looking for that guy that's like 5 yards per carry, like coming in and being that workhorse. But Barber served a role, and he served it really well last year. And I think, like we talked about, reliable in short yardage situations. And almost every time we needed him to convert a short yardage situation, he did. And I don't think people realize how important of a skill set that is to have and how important that was for our playoff run last year.
I think we may have watched a different play, but on that pass block that he supposedly blew, he was just a chip. It was Tamarick Hemingway's block, and he just threw his shoulder and released. So I'm not putting that all on Peyton Barber. I actually thought he played well the other night. He hit the hole just like Peyton Barber does. It's not the sexiest thing in the world, but he still got his yards. And he fought, that touchdown run he had, I think Sam Cosmi looked fantastic on it. But
he buried somebody.
Peyton Barber did his job. And you don't think Peyton Barber's doing anything else besides being that goal line back, but he's also out there on special teams. He was on kick return. He was on punt. So he's all over the place, and I think that's really ultimately what Ron wants.
And I think it's important for fans to kind of keep this in perspective. Like, there's not many Antonio Gibsons like walking around on the street.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Think about how many bell cow backs there are in today's modern NFL, and there's like 5, 4. You know what I mean? And like, I don't even put Antonio Gibson in that category of elite runners just yet. I think he could be, but I think it's a little ways to go. So to think that your third running back is going to have like elite traits Like, I hate to break it to you, he's not going to be your third running back. He's going to be doing something else for somebody else. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think that's an important perspective to have. Like, this team's very fortunate to have two pretty dynamic running backs, and obviously you want to kind of find the best version of that third back position. But like you said, he does teams. He's got a nice role in the offense. So again, like, you know, fans get all fired up about it, and I understand why. But like, dude's a good football player, and he fits that role very nicely.
I do also think that if they feel as if Patterson may get scooped up, okay, they have the ability to keep 4 backs. There's a lot of ways to work the roster, especially with the versatility that they bring on defense, that they can actually keep him on the active roster and not lose him.
And one thing to consider, go ahead, Logan.
No, go ahead. I want to hear what you guys
say one thing to consider was basically they have a new they kind of dipped their toe into it last year with the new COVID rules and injured reserve that can basically kind of move the practice squad around. So in theory, we're 10 deep on the offensive line. A lot of them are versatile with, you know, Flowers can play tackle or guard. They can in theory keep 9 solid people for our offensive line, put one on the practice squad and sneak on a running back if they really want to. So that's one way to go for it.
Yeah, and you have a good swing tackle and Lucas too, who can play both left and right if needed. So I think that gives us a little bit of flexibility. And to your point, we have a pretty reliable interior offensive line from a depth perspective, and guys who have had a lot of success in the league. So I think that could be an area where you do see us take 9. The only issue becomes, what do you do at the wide receiver position? Because we only kept 5 last year, right? So when you look at that like roster breakdown in that mold, we only got 5 wide receivers last year. We got 6 going this year. I'm thinking when we look at the potential cuts and everything like that. So you went from a unit that lacked depth going into the beginning of the season last year to one that we're probably going to at least keep 6 wide receivers. So if you keep those 4 running backs, do you cut down on that ability to keep that extra wide receiver?
No, you're keeping 6 no matter what. I'm going to read you the 5 receivers we kept last year for our active roster. Okay. Get excited.
It's not good. It's not good.
Actually, this may not be right, but I can't even read you the list. We had Cody Latimer. We had Trey Quinn, Steve Sims. I mean, obviously Cam Sims, but it was so bad. So yeah, you're only keeping 5.
You know what was interesting? Ben Standick had a really good point today on his podcast. He basically said, I think it was yesterday. Yesterday was a symbolic day for Washington. That's when Curtis Samuel came back. It was like we released Kelvin Harmon, and then Curtis Samuel came back on the same day. And then in 2018, when Kelvin Harmon actually started, he was our wide receiver too. So that 2-year evolution just kind of shows you how deep we've kind of evolved over the past couple of years. And I like our wide receiver depth. I think we're going to go there in a second with our conversation, Ryan. But I think I like our wide receiver depth, and I think we don't have to depend on anybody. I think we have a variety of weapons. But I'll kind of freeze right now while you can kind of take over the question. Go ahead. I know where you're going with it.
So, well, one quick thing here, though, just to hit on Mark's point. So it wasn't even Cody Latimer, because if you remember, Latimer
lost his mind. Yeah,
he got into some legal trouble there.
Yeah, Latimer didn't even play for the Washington. Yeah, I gotta go. Yes,
so we had Terry McLaurin, Steven Sims, Dontrell Inman, Antonio Gandy Golden, and Isaiah Wright were the 5 that broke camp last year.
Wow.
So it was not a deep one. Before we go on, Logan, you were gonna hop in there when you passed it over to George. Anything you wanted to jump in there? Okay.
I was just saying, it seems like you guys got outlines, and I'm over here just like fumbling around in the basement.
you're the tenure professional.
You're good. You don't need an outline.
Yeah, you're good. You're fine. Yeah, I'm freestyling too, man. We're all good.
Yeah, you're just reading off the outline, George. Come on.
No, but I think with one of the bigger names getting cut, and I'll pass this to you, George, did the release of Kelvin Harmon surprise you as we're talking about wide receivers here? Because that was a name that I think a lot of Washington football fans were kind of excited to see him rehabbing from that ACL injury, coming back healthy and wanting to see what he can be. He was a good guy to like push the chains, another reliable like third down guy at NC State. Was that a name that surprised you when he got released?
Not really, to be honest, right? I'm going to kind of give you my evolution on Kelvin Harmon. So I didn't think he was going to make the team, to be truthful with you guys. I thought that he shined with Dwayne Haskins at quarterback. He was drafted by the previous regime. And I feel like with that torn ACL, he was already facing a deficit coming into the season. I think I know actually we're John Keim said, he basically said that Scott Turner lobbied and kind of fought for Antonio Gandy-Golden last year. That was part of his draft pick. That's who he wanted as part of his roster. And they fulfill similar skills. So I kind of saw them as similar players. They were 50-50 contested catch guys, big body guys, possession receivers that don't separate. So I thought Harmon basically had a struggle to make the team. I honestly think very highly of Harmon. I think he has great character, and I thought he was making a comeback. You could hear some good murmurs during training camp that he was starting to shine, and that's what kind of raised my eyebrow. Like maybe he is going to make the team, but I think they did a respectful service for him. They knew he wasn't going to make it, so they kind of released him now to hopefully latch on to another team later on. To kind of finish my thought, though, that whole wide receiver 6, I don't think it's a necessary big glaring hole for us, because I think we're going to be more of a collective offense. I think between, Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin and Gibson, McKissick and Thomas, everyone's going to pitch in and everyone has their part. That wide receiver 6 is more of a depth piece that maybe get in after a couple injuries. So I don't think we have to worry too much about it. And I'm high on Cam Sims. I was hard on him before, but I think Cam Sims kind of showed out last year with a couple big games, including the Buccaneers game, had 100 yards in the playoff game. So, he's kind of a high upside guy too. So it's kind of my thoughts on the wide receiver core.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too is when you talk about the 6, and this is one of the things that stood out to me the other night, was how explosive DeAndre Carter looked as a punt returner.
True.
And I feel like that's something that we've lacked for a little while. And I think if you look at that unit of 6, I'm almost kind of carving out his role when I'm projecting out the roster, thinking that he's going to lock up a spot just because of his ability to play on special teams. So then I start looking at it's kind of a battle of 5, and this is just my take on it. We'll see if you guys feel the same, but it gets pretty tight as you start getting to that back end of Steven Sims, Cam Sims, Isaiah Wright, Antonio Gandy-Golden. You're really looking at one guy from that group if we keep 6, if DeAndre Carter makes the roster. So, Logan, is there anyone that you see as locks? I think we talk about on the show, McLaurin, Humphreys, Samuel, and De'Ami Brown, I feel are pretty safe. Do you agree with those 4 as kind of being locks for the roster? Obviously McLaurin and Brown and Samuel, but is Humphreys safe?
Yeah, so I think that the staff kind of gave you the answers to the test in the first preseason game, at least in what they're thinking at the moment, right? So you look at the first group: Terry McLaurin, Cam Sims, Humphreys. I think that was the first 3, right? If I'm not mistaken. Obviously, Samuels is coming in. That's 4, right? And I think those are going to be your 4 right there. And then surprisingly to me, obviously De'Ami Brown we talked about, but Steve Sims was the second wide receiver in with the 2s there, right? And he was a guy that I thought had kind of played himself out of this starting role, or even the future plans for this organization. But if you look at the way he was playing, I thought he looked dynamic on releases, getting off press. You mentioned one of his catches already. He looked kind of like he had new life in his body. And if you're looking at the depth chart as dictated by the second preseason game, he's your guy. So the guys outside looking in are AGG, Wright, which isn't totally surprising. I'm a little surprised by AGG because I thought he was, in the 4 days I went to practice, he was kind of coming alive a little bit. However, dude's having a hard time getting off press coverage. And if you're a big body receiver, you got to do that. And so unless he can kind of turn a corner there, another thing, and this is very tinfoil hat-ish, I think they might be able to sneak him to practice squad if they do it right. You know what I mean? I think they could. I think he's a guy that didn't play a ton last year, but I totally agree with you that, and if you look at, so to finish my thought, that second wide receiver group was filled out not by the kid from BYU, but rather DeAndre Carter, who is not as good a receiver as that kid, but you already mentioned that he kind of brings this dynamic punt returner ability. I played with Dre when I was in San Francisco. I played with him when I was in Houston, and that's his skill set. That's why he's on the team, right? Is to catch punts, make sure the ball doesn't hit the ground, and just be Mr. Consistent back there. So I think there's your answer, right? You get one special teams player, and those other, that's it. And I think those other guys who I didn't mention, and
yeah, and Logan, I think we're breaking up. I think George, you had a point to make right there. I'll let you.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you a question, Logan, if you don't mind. So, yeah. I'm really big on Steven Sims. I definitely was. He was my breakout candidate last year. I thought he was really gonna have a big year, but he kind of struggled last year. He kind of struggled with drops as well. As a pass catcher yourself, Logan, how hard is it to shake that habit? What have you seen in the past? What do players do to kind of get their mindset back? Is it something that can be fixed, or what have you perceived over the past couple of years?
Yeah, I mean it's really interesting. Like, everyone taught, like Simone Biles just had that thing where they got
Exactly.
the spinnies or whatever at the gymnastics, and like you hear about pitchers with the yips and all that kind of stuff. There is a
Exactly.
little bit of that. Like you'll see a guy just go through a phase like where they can't catch a cold, like quite literally, and it's all psychological, right? Like they're just so in their head, and like I've been there too. I've played probably half of a season just thinking like I'm physically incapable of catching a football. Right. So you kind of like go back to basics. You got to kind of like, I don't want to say reteach yourself, but just kind of familiarize yourself with the football in your hands. Like I literally just kind of walk around with the football and just like squeeze it and practice tucking it and spin it and catch it just like to myself, just to kind of get used to the feel of it. Like I wasn't scared of it anymore, like kind of familiarize myself with the ball again, And I got a lot of guys that get on the jugs and catch, 200, 400 passes after practice again, just to kind of break through that kind of anxiety that they get when the ball's in the air. And right now, honestly, like having gone to practice and having watched this first preseason, like, I wasn't following this team when I was playing. But last year was the first year I saw this team like a lot. I was covering them, talking about them quite a bit, and I was not impressed with Steve Sims. And I will say right now, he appears to be kind of a new version of himself, maybe kind of that breakout kind of candidate. The thing that with Steve Sims that always gets me, though, is like, where does he play on special teams? If he's going to be your sixth guy, like, what does he do for you on teams? And if you looked at the game yesterday, like AGG or whatever that was Thursday, AGG played on all 4 special teams. And so is that an audition for AGG to see if he can do the teams thing, like, and not have him play a ton on offense? You know what I mean? Is that kind of what they're looking at? Because right now, I don't know what role Steve Sims fills for you on teams if he's not your starting returner.
Yeah, and I actually saw a stat. Actually, I think he had 5 muff punts last year as a punt return, which led the league.
I remember all of them.
Yeah, so it's pretty tough. So, yeah, so I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah, it's funny. Like AGG, you didn't really get to see his inability to get off of press coverage at Liberty. I feel like because he was just so much more superior as an athlete to what he was going up against from a competition perspective. But it's definitely something he's struggled with. And Sims are just going to say the thing about the muff bumps, like that is something that I thought was the nail in the coffin for him, was his audition last year on special teams. So that's where when DeAndre Carter started to come and take that role as a punt returner, I thought that was going to be the end of Steven Sims until I saw this last week's game. But
absolutely, yeah, I totally agree with that.
So I think the one last thing I want to make sure we hit on is the tight ends, obviously, because we do have you, Logan. So and we touched on it a little bit last time you were on the show. But one of the biggest surprises to me, I felt like, was Simis Reyes' ability to block. I mean, for someone that was learning the position, he actually stood out to me as like a pretty solid blocker. I wanted to see if you saw the same thing, if you were impressed by his first audition. And I think last time we talked about, hey, maybe we sneak him and tuck him away on the practice squad. Is that something that's even feasible now? Is he someone through his auditions that maybe gets sniped and we can't stash on the practice squad?
Yeah, so I think, quite frankly, I think you feel pretty good about him if you had to walk into him with him as your 4 or 3rd tight end this year, right? Like, I know he's not playing against like the top tier competition, but like one of the things that immediately strikes you about Simis when you meet him and you talk with him is like he's a big human being, right? And like he's not the most technically sound guy, but he's not like afraid of like contact in the way you think a basketball player is. Like it's weird. Like after working out with him, I kind of came to this conclusion that like he's not going to be like Mr. Dynamic receiver. He's going to be like a better inline guy probably first, because he's not afraid of contact. He's not afraid to kind of smash in there. His footwork's not great. His hand placement's not great, but he's 6'6", like he's a big dude, right? And he puts that body on people, and people go, they move. He's into being big. He's also extremely strong in the weight room, right? So I think that he, obviously it wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but you saw you got a preview what the potential is for him at the position. And I think that that's exciting if you're Washington, exciting if you're a coach for the Washington football team, because it shows that money and the time that you've put in is going to return a dividend possibly sometime this year.
Yeah.
I mean, after watching Tim Tebow block today, I'm fairly certain.
What are your thoughts on that, Logan? What's going on?
I haven't seen Tim Tebow, but the thing about Tim, like, even I don't know if we talked about it on this show before, but like when he was with New York, like we would watch them, we would watch their film, And like they tried to get him to play fullback, and he was bad at blocking. Like he was bad at it. And so everyone says, "Oh, the game's changed. You know, he can come in and he can play receiver." Like he ran a 4.7. I don't know what receiver runs a 4.7, right? I don't fast moving like F position tight end, you know, runs a 4.7. Those guys are all really fast now. And so, like, what role are you expecting him to fill, Tim Tebow? Like, that's the thing that kind of befuddles the mind when you talk about Tim Tebow is like he was bad at it before. He's 33 years old or 34 years old. Like, he hasn't been playing football. Like, what makes you think he's going to be better at blocking now? And he's not. He's a good athlete, but he's not elite for what the position requires. So, to me, I always thought that was kind of a long shot. I thought it was kind of a weird move by Urban Meyer. Like, you could have kind of thrown a lottery pick on a guy. You know, there's a whole bunch of guys like that come out of college basketball to football. Why not take a flyer on a guy like that if you're but you know, hey, you got your favorite football player of all time, Urban Meyer, wears Tim Tebow pajamas, you know, you're going to go first, and you know, you get that guy in the building, you feel pretty good about it.
I think if you just Google Tim Tebow block, you'll see what you needed to see, and it did not improve from what it was in New York. So,
I mean, his balance is really bad. So he was just getting tossed left and right. He was leaning hard. You can see it. But Samus, yeah, he may not have had the best technique, but his willingness to block is probably the most exciting thing. He will mix it up with anybody. So that sticks out on film right away when you watch him block. Now,
not blocking, I think we already talked about one of Hemingway's whiffs on when he was blocking in pass coverage. And, you know, I want to ask you, George, do you see him making the roster? Do you think he's one of these first cut candidates for us? What do you see happening at the tight end position?
So it's hard to grade, right? So I can only I can only judge from hearsay, and going into the first preseason game, there's a lot of like momentum behind Hemingway. You kind of heard good things about him, and you know, there's good like practice reports, and there was even kind of whispers of him being tight end 2 behind Logan Thomas. I think maybe he's more of a practice player than a gamer, and that's something that's very, you know, that's something startling to kind of keep in mind. I don't think he's a cut candidate yet. I think he's still in the mix. I do like John Bates. I think he's kind of underrated and kind of under the radar. I think he's a willing blocker. I think he'll find some little holes in the zone. I don't know. I just don't know what the team's going to do. There's so many good competitive battles. Like, are they going to keep 4 tight ends? And like, for me, I don't know if it's a total blasphemy. Like, if it's between Sammis Reyes' upside and Tamarick Hemingway on the team, I potentially want to keep Reyes, right? I feel like Reyes could basically grow and has a higher upside. But maybe I'm just talking as a fan. I don't know the technicalities of the pure tight end, so I don't really know. But I don't think he's in danger of a cut yet. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
You know, one quick thing is you talked about John Bates and his ability to find like that soft spot in the zone. I mean, he had one catch where he got in front of the free safety and found that soft spot in the zone and made a really, really nice catch over the middle. So I like John Bates too. I think he's going to be a solid player. And we talked about him with Logan last time Logan was on. But yeah, I don't think any of the tight ends actually make it through this first cut of 5. I don't think any of them get cut. I think it's going to be something that we continue to see over the next couple of weeks, see how Reyes progresses. And, you know, I think we'll look elsewhere to cut.
And like, just to make a quick comment, like I was at practice, you know, like right before the preseason game, basically. And like, of the guys, like Hemingway sticks out to you. Like, I mean, he's big, he's physical. He like Bates in line is one of the most dominant blocking rookies I've heard. Like, he's so good in line. Like, I love it. Like, I love seeing a tight end that can do what he does, that kind of is aggressive, but he's not great as your move guy, off the ball guy. He doesn't seem very comfortable there. And Hemingway, in practice at least, seemed pretty comfortable with that, you know, kind of filling that role. And he's bigger than you think. And he's getting all the reps with in that kind of third tight end role when they go 13 personnel, and he's in there mixing it up with Chase Young. And like, there's a guy again who's not got a great blocking skill set, but kind of has the right mentality. So I had kind of like moderate expectations for him coming into and I think I don't want to say he stumbled, but he didn't perform as well as his practice would have led me to believe, right? And again, like, that to be said for the fact that like he's playing in practice, you play a specific role within the offense. You play that third tight end, right? And then in the preseason game, now all of a sudden you're expected to play Y, F, and these other positions you don't get a reps at. So like, sometimes it's unfair. Like I was put in that spot numerous times in my career, and it sucks, but you got to be ready to go. And there was a little bit of that going on. Also, I read today that he concussed himself in the game. So like, how much of that is affecting his performance? Like, I don't think he's cut himself yet, but it's definitely, I think he had kind of, at least from talking with guys like John Keim, Chris Russell, Julie Donaldson, people are at practice every day. He was the third guy, right? It was and Hemingway. And now I think the door is cracked open a little bit for you to say, well, maybe Ricky Seals-Jones comes in. After talking to the tight end coach, I don't think that ever happens because the tight end coach kind of like, I don't think he can block. And this is like old school, gritty, like dip in the mouth kind of tight end coach. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
we're going to block here. But I think now you kind of run into the thing that George brought up is, does Sammy's come on as your 4? Hemingway plays as the 3 for the first 4 games, and then he's relegated to practice squad or some kind of dynamic like that. I think it's interesting.
It will definitely be interesting to see who gets tossed on the pup at some point in time because roster spots are going to get open that way as well.
Yeah, and we talked about that last time. Like we were saying that with Reyes. Like, does he come up with that mysterious injury and we stash him on the pup?
I mean, realistically, that's Gandy Golden all day long, in my opinion.
Hey, Logan, do you think Sammy Reyes could walk onto an NFL game like this time this year, at any point this year, or no?
Any point this year?
Yeah.
I think there's a really good chance that he plays on special teams at some point this year.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is I think you put him on punt coverage. I think you can do punt return, maybe cover a kickoff, but probably more likely kickoff return. And I think maybe work his way in as the third guy, depending on the package and the situation that they're trying to use him in. When I was working out with him, he said they had a lot of packages for him where they'd go 2 tight ends and he'd be the X wide receiver and they'd like throw him a fade, right? I could easily see something like that happening. I mean, the problem there is that like that's a cool package and that's a cool idea, but you're going to take Terry McLaurin off or, Curtis Samuels or, even like Humphreys or Gibson or one of those guys off the field so that he can do that. I don't know. I mean, that's a nice ace in the hole. And I think maybe that shows up at some point, but it's always important to kind of keep that in perspective. Like, who are you going to get more miles out of in that situation? And, you have one of the best receivers in the NFL on your team. Like, you don't want him not on the field for any reason, So
just to go back to something, did you mention that they were using Tamarick Hemingway more as like a receiving tight end at one point?
No, they were using it more as like the move, kind of like think fullback, more fullback type stuff. You know what I mean? Like cross block, like inserts. Because like I said, Bates did not look cool. Like despite his kind of, like the way he excelled in line, he struggles moving. Like he didn't do it a lot at Boise State, and like it shows up a bit in his game now. Like he's got a little bit of a learning curve there. And Hemingway seemed to have had kind of a knack or a good feel for that. And like, that's perfect for you, right? Because you don't want to put like I saw Logan Thomas playing fullback in the game the other day. And like, to me, that's like not what you want your star. Like, would you put Travis Kelce back there? Like, would you put Darren Waller back there? Like those positions, that guy is like concussion fodder, right? So like, I had to do this. This is not a criticism of Hemingway, but in terms of roster value, like put Logan Paulsen or Hemingway back there, let him get a concussion. Like that's the whole point of the position. And like, that's why you're there. You know what I mean? So like, I think I'm surprised they didn't have him back there, to be quite honest, but hey, I'm not the coach.
That's great. Well, you were more than a concussion guy for us over here, Ty, man. You were a very reliable piece for us. So
the problem is we had the other concussion.
That's right.
Jordan Reed always had a concussion.
Poor guy,
yeah, poor guy.
Yeah. I mean, he's doing all right financially. Don't worry, but not financially poor.
Good point.
For a long-term health, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough there.
That's a good question. I mean, like, would you be getting your brain scrambled for $50 million? I think a lot of people would say yes, right?
That's like the question: would you go one round with Mike Tyson? Yeah.
No.
You would do it for $50 million or $100 million?
I don't think I'd be seeing any of that money.
I mean, I'm not going to stand for 3 minutes. I'm not saying that. I mean, but I would take his shots for the money. Yeah. I'd get knocked out 100%.
Yeah, just make sure you got your mouthpiece in. Tongue's nice and clenched. And then, don't choke on your own tongue. They got good doctors for a reason there.
Exactly.
That's funny. Well, we'll close it out here. I appreciate everybody taking the time to join us. Before we do close out, two things. One, just want to plug again, if you caught us in the beginning of the show, we did plug some of the great work the Hog Farmers have going on right now, supporting pediatric cancer. And one of the things they're trying to do for the 11-year-old Jalen, who is in stage 4 colon cancer and only has a 2-month life expectancy. So if you could go help fulfill some of his wishes at that website through the Hog Farmers or through their Twitter, please go check them out. We'll also do a quick roundtable. I want everyone to kind of give a shout to where people can find you. Logan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, you can find me at Logan_Paulsen82 doing some breakdowns of the games and just kind of that's all I do really on there. You're not going to learn anything about me other than that. So come check it out.
And that's on Instagram. And seriously, everybody go check it out because it's one of the best followers. And if you're someone that's trying to get into film, if you're someone that's just passionate about football, it's a great account to follow. So definitely go give Logan a follow over there.
You guys can find me. You guys can find me at Mark Crow on Twitter. Logan, we got to pull you into the dark side.
Yeah, come to Twitter, man. Twitter's awesome.
Twitter's awesome, but it's also got like
it's
I don't know, 50% of it is like the worst trolls you'll ever come across. So better off. And George, how about you, man? Where can they find you?
And what's up, guys? I'm G Carmi 21 at Twitter. I write for Full Press Coverage Washington, and I also have an upcoming Full Press Coverage podcast, and I write for the Burgundy Zone. So, guys, find me on Twitter. I'll be there, and we can definitely be in touch. And looking forward to talking to you guys.
Yeah, and for myself, I'm Ryan. You can find me at WhatGibbsFF on Twitter. Definitely give all of us a follow if you're not following us, and we appreciate all of the support. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate you joining.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good night, y'all.